Good evening, everybody. My name is Moishe Lebovits. I'm one of the rabbinical administrators of the Chaf K. Part of my responsibilities is to answer the many questions that come up on a regular basis from consumers just as yourself. In addition, I travel throughout the East Coast, making sure that companies that we certify are kosher, as well as trying to convince many manufacturers that are not kosher on the value of kosher and why they should get certified. So therefore, I wanted to just start the first half of the program by discussing the questions that come up, and then we will leave time towards the end of the lecture of any questions that you may have on kashrut, whether in your homes, whether things that you buy in the stores. So the first question that comes up on a regular basis is the topic of bishul akum. Now, bishul akum means that a non-Jewish person is not allowed to cook for you in your home, and you're not allowed to buy something that a non-Jewish person cooks for you. Now, the reason is twofold. One is we're concerned that maybe the non-Jewish person will actually take non-kosher and put it in your products, put it in your food. So the rabbis felt that if that's the concern, we can't have a non-Jewish person cook for you. The other concern is maybe that the fact that food is a staple of life, people have to eat, and it's something which is social as well, and people will come to say, wow, that's a great food you made, what's the recipe? And they'll end up coming close to you. And the rabbis felt that if you end up having a social event and asking people how the food was made, and the non-Jewish people come close to you, that is intermarriage, and the rabbis felt that we don't want the non-Jewish people and the Jewish people mixing, and therefore they separated them by having them not cook for a Jewish person. However, there are exceptions to the rule. One exception is something which is edible raw. If you take an apple, you can just bite into an apple as is, and no need for any cooking to be done. So if a non-Jewish person wants to cook an apple for you, that's perfectly permitted. In addition, let's say you want to have a cup of hot tea, and they want to have hot water for you put up. Because you don't need the water to be heated, the non-Jewish person can cook a pot of water for you, an urn of water, because there's no issue of bishul akum on that concern. The other exception is something which is not fit to be served on a king's table. If you go to a smorgasbord or a wedding and you find the product on those tables, then it would be an issue of a non-Jewish person cooking for you. But things which are not fit to be served on a king's table or on a smorgasbord are not an issue of bishul akum. The question that comes up as a consumer is that many times you'll find on products they'll say in Hebrew, Bishal Yisrael, which means a Jewish person cooked for you. But if you go to a supermarket and random products, which is the same item as Bishal Yisrael, you won't see anything on the package. All you see is a national hashgacha on the package. And the question is, how are you able to buy those products? Because there's nobody cooking for you in the Jewish plants, or the plants that have certification are cooking for you most of the time. They're just rabbis visiting on a regular basis, but there's no one standing there lighting the fires. And the case in point is potato chips. If you take the large manufacturers of potato chips nowadays, there is no one standing there cooking with a Jewish person or any mashgiach, as they call it, there cooking the potato chips for you. And the question is, how is it possible? Because we just finished saying a non-Jewish person is not allowed to cook for you. And the answer is that a potato is not fit to be served on a king's table, because the way they make potato chips is they deep fry the potatoes. You will not find a deep fried potato chip on a smorgasbord or on a king's table, and therefore the rabbis and the larger kosher agencies maintain there's no issue of bishul akum with potato chips. You're able to buy all the potato chips that you want as long as it has a symbol indicating that it's kosher status. The reason why you will find the potato chips that say Bishul Yisrael or rabbis cooking it in Hebrew is because these people don't own any factories. What they do is they rent space in the larger commercial factories, and they have rabbis visiting and staying throughout the production. And once the rabbis are there, they will make sure that the fires are lit, because they're anyway spending time making sure that the products are kosher certified. In addition to the bishul akum and cooking for a non-Jew in the factories, it also comes up at home. As many times you have non-Jewish help and they want to put something in the oven for you, or they want to put something in the microwave, and that's also a concern of bishul akum. Now, a microwave oven is a little bit lenient because the oven doesn't work the same way as a regular oven. The microwave oven is basically cooking the water in the product, and it's not the same method as regular cooking. So rabbis felt that you can be a little bit lenient when dealing with microwave ovens. In addition, something which is cooked already is not an issue of bishul akum. So if you wanted to have your non-Jewish helper take something from the freezer for you which is already cooked, and you wanted them to put it in the oven, there is no concern of bishul akum on that as well. And we get the questions a lot when they wanted to take something out and it's frozen and they want to recook it. That is not an issue of bishul akum. Many times you're traveling, especially now with the hot weather, and people ask frequently if you're allowed to go into a coffee shop and buy something. Is there an issue of maris ayin? Now, maris ayin means that you're doing something from the onlooker will say, wait a second, why is this person doing something which looks a little odd? If you're going into a McDonald's, for example, to just use the restroom, people will think, wait, why is he going into McDonald's? And they'll say, wait, if he's going in, it must be permitted. Obviously, that's not necessarily the case. But Maris Ayin is discussed in the Code of Jewish Law in Yeridea, and it speaks about the fact that we know you're not allowed to cook milk and meat together. But what happens if you wanted to take milk that's parv, non-dairy milk, and put that together with meat? Are you allowed to cook that together? So the Ramah, Moishe Isserles, he wrote that he said that if you wanted to cook parv and milk with meat together, you can't necessarily do that without putting some sort of indication that it's not real milk, because people will pass by, they'll see this non-dairy milk, they'll see you cooking meat, and they'll say, wait a second, this is milk and meat together, and we're not allowed to cook milk and meat together. So he said you wanted to do that, you put out some almonds on the table, indicating that the milk is coming from the almonds, and then you'll be able to cook the milk and meat together. Now, according to that, many rabbis nowadays felt that that should be comparable to a non-dairy creamer. If you go to weddings and you go to many affairs, or even in your own homes, you want to have a meat meal, and then you want to have parv, a non-dairy ice cream. Do you have to put the container on the table? Because onlookers will say, wait a second, I'm having a meat meal here, and passing by, and people will say, wait, there's ice cream. Is that parv ice cream or dairy ice cream? So some rabbis felt that, hey, just like the rabbi felt that you should put the almonds on the table, you should also put the container of milk on the table, indicating that it's parv. Or now you have margarine, or all these non-dairy products that look like dairy. So Chacham Avad Yosef maintained that because nowadays everyone knows that there's non-dairy creamers. Maybe 50 years ago when it just came out it was different, but nowadays everyone knows there's such a thing as non-dairy creamers, or there's things of non-dairy milk. So therefore there's no reason to put it out at the wedding or in a meal or any kind of indication of a container stating that it's really non-dairy, because it's known in the industry, it's known in the world that it exists, and there's no purpose and reason for you to put it out. Based on that, the rabbis do discuss about going into a restaurant and using the restroom. If you're going on a highway and you see a Starbucks, you see a Dunkin Donuts, you see a rest stop, and you want to just use the restroom, no one that's looking at you is going to think, wait, this woman is going into the rest stop to go into a McDonald's or a Starbucks to buy something that's not kosher. They're going to use the restroom because it's so common that there's restrooms and rest stops on the highway. There's no need for anyone to be concerned of issues regarding Maris Ayin in that regard. However, one thing to note is that if you are going into a rest stop and you're going to sit by the window, that's not something recommended, because people that are passing by won't necessarily see, oh, you're just drinking a coffee or something which is permitted, which we'll get to in a few minutes. They may think you're eating something because they don't see past the window. They just see from a distance that you're sitting at a rest stop at a window. They don't necessarily know that you're just going to drink a coffee or have a rest for a moment. But using the restroom would be something which is permitted, because everyone knows you're walking in there to do that. There's another question that comes up many times, especially when you're shopping, and that's the K symbol. Does anybody know what the K symbol stands for? Well, it's actually a trick question, because it depends where the product is manufactured. If the product is being manufactured in New York, then the K symbol has to be backed up by one of the many, many kosher agencies in the world. Anybody can guess today how many kosher agencies there are? Well, as of today, there are 1,400 about kosher agencies in the world. By the time the lecture's finished, there might be another 20 or 30. But that's just the nature of the kosher industry. It's such a large industry, so many different countries, and so many different manufacturing facilities, that there are many, many kosher agencies out there. So if you're dealing with a K symbol on the product, if it's in New York or one of the other states that make sure that it has to be backed up by one of the kosher agencies, then you have to check up what is behind the K symbol. But the K symbol in other states could be backed up by nobody. The manufacturer could decide, or the manager of the factory could say, you know what, all these ingredients seem to be kosher, let's put the K symbol on there. So the K is a red flag. Whenever you see a product that has a K symbol, it stands for kosher, but it means absolutely nothing. So therefore, it's your job as a kosher consumer to see the K symbol and ask your rabbi who is behind this K symbol, and if it's something that we should be purchasing at all. Getting back to the discussion of going shopping and going to rest areas and going to different locations, many people want to know about buying soda without a certification. Could you buy Pepsi without a certification? Could you get Slurpees from 7-Eleven? So the way Pepsi works is the following. Pepsi works that they get their syrups from different countries. It goes into the bottling facility, which is actually one that we certify in College Point, and they get the syrup in large containers, and then they get sugar from trucks, and then when the sugar finishes, they get more sugar and then more sugar. Now the way it works is they take the syrup and they put it in the holding tank, and once it's out of the holding tank and ready to be bottled, they'll mix it with sugar and water and different flavors. Now Chaf K certifies a few Pepsi bottling facilities in different areas, and because Pepsi wants the syrup to taste the same way as in New York or New Jersey or different states, they make sure that all their bottling facilities uses the same syrup. So even if you're in a situation where you're traveling and you don't see a Chaf K on a Pepsi, Obviously, we make sure that everything has a kosher symbol on it, but if you're in a situation where you want the Pepsi and you don't see a symbol on the Pepsi, you would be able to purchase the Pepsi product as long as it says made on the Pepsi bottling authority. There's two exceptions. One is Hawaiian Punch and one is Welch's grape juice. Hawaiian Punch is made in a different kind of facility. It could be made in a juice plant, and Welch's grape juice can have issues of real grape in it, and therefore it will be an issue of a non-Jewish person perhaps using wine of a Jew, and it gets a little complicated. That's why we suggest that if you're going to buy Hawaiian Punch and Welch's grape juice, it should only be with the kosher symbol on it, because of the fact that the facilities are making other products, and different kinds of factories are being used to make those products. When you're dealing with different kinds of products, like Pepsi, for example, it'll say many times natural flavors. And many questions, is it considered grape? Are you using real grape juice in products? Even if you have a product that's certified under Chaf K, what kind of grape is actually being used? Anytime you see a product that says natural flavors, there's probably 50 to 60 chemicals in that product making it taste like the real thing. Because if you had real cherries in your cherry Pepsi, it'll be $10 a bottle perhaps, if not more, and not your 99 cents or $1.59, whatever it costs now. It happens to be the first time that I went into the facility to certify that product and look at the ingredients was the last time I drank soda. Because of the fact that what goes into the facility and different things. I mean, I stopped eating a lot of things. I don't eat a lot of cake and cookies and pastries because of the fact of what I see that goes on in the facilities. It just was better for me to stay on the healthy side of things. Once we're going to Pepsi, let's talk about Slurpees and 7-Eleven. Many children, especially younger children and some adults, go into a 7-Eleven looking for a Slurpee, and they want to know if they can purchase a Slurpee product. Now, we used to certify Slurpee in Brooklyn until it came a point where people were buying it before we certified it, and they weren't really care so much about the certification. So the company said, you know what, we're having enough customers without the certification. We don't want to pay a rabbi to be constantly coming into our facility and checking on our syrup. But the way 7-Eleven works is very interesting. They'll take the syrup that comes from the back, and each one has their own separate hoses. And when you're buying that Coke, you're buying the specific Coke that's coming from the back, and it does have an hashgacha, a hechsher on that specific syrup. But there are 5 to 6 non-kosher flavors. Now, how do we know as kosher consumers that when you're buying that Coke syrup that there's no non-kosher in the machine before the Coke was put in? So 7-Eleven usually works so that they're going to put a flavor in there, and it's going to last for a few months, and whenever they're going to change over flavors, they don't change over on a regular basis because they know that people like certain flavors, and they'll keep it for a certain amount of time, especially in different seasons. Like in the summer, they'll have certain flavors and they'll run for a few months, and then they'll change to other flavors. The research has shown that when they're changing flavors over, they're going to wash out the machinery because they don't want the customer to have Coke and then he's going to have some rainbow Fanta. People want Coke, they want Coke, they don't want other flavors. But some rabbis felt that there was no one verifying that it's actually being done, and they tell their students that if you want to buy a Slurpee from a 7-Eleven, it's not something which is recommended. But other rabbis maintain that in order for you to be concerned that there's any non-kosher in that machine, you have to make sure that you're the first one coming out to the 7-Eleven when they just finished changing over. And then you have to be concerned that underneath that Coke flavor is actually some non-kosher. So some rabbis felt if you wanted to buy the Slurpee from a 7-Eleven, just get a little more syrup out, put it in the drain. Obviously, you would have to pay for that or ask them if you can do that. And then any non-kosher, perhaps, flavor that may have thought it had been in there is actually washed down the drain. And that's why some of the rabbis, and you see that most of the Jewish community is buying Slurpees from the 7-Eleven. Many times people ask questions about Dunkin Donuts. I don't know in this area if there's any Dunkin Donuts that's actually certifying the entire store, but in Brooklyn and other communities, they do have Dunkin Donuts that are certified. Now, the way Dunkin Donuts works...
It's not too close, though. It's like a couple miles away.
Oh, okay. So the way Dunkin Donuts works is following. If you have a kosher Dunkin Donuts, what happens is that no baking is done at site. What they do is they call the satellite bakery. They take the donuts in the satellite baking that's owned by the franchisee, and they'll bake the donuts in that facility. If the company is under certification, then that satellite bakery will basically have a rabbi on a regular basis come into the facility, and he will verify that all the ingredients are kosher and all that's being made in that facility is kosher. When the donuts are being made and other products there, they'll take it and put it on the truck and bring it into the specific Dunkin Donuts that's kosher. So if you have a Dunkin Donuts that's certified, you can buy everything from that store because of the fact that the rabbi that's certifying the store is also certifying the manufacturing of the donuts, which is done off-site. The problem is that if you go to a Dunkin Donuts that's not certified, and you want to buy a donut, that's not something which you can do, because even though you may say that, oh look, it's just a donut, and if the kosher store is certified, it's the same donut in the non-kosher store, that's wrong, because the non-kosher store, in their satellite bakery, they're not only cooking the donuts, they're also cooking the bacon and all the other non-kosher items in the same deep fryer in that satellite facility. So therefore, when you go into a Dunkin Donuts that's not certified, the only thing that you can buy at a Dunkin Donuts is a non-flavored coffee. If you wanted to buy a flavored coffee, or even have some of the shots that come along with the coffee, you would have to verify that the flavors are kosher certified, and the shots as well would have to be kosher certified. And they may change from time to time, because those things can change on a constant basis. So it's the job of a consumer, again, if you're going into a non-certified Dunkin Donuts, to make sure that you're checking for these few points. In regards to Starbucks, it's a little different. In order for us to discuss Starbucks at length, it would need probably a 2-hour share, which you don't have time for. But the way Starbucks works is a little differently, because Starbucks have dishwashers in their stores. As opposed to Dunkin Donuts, they don't have dishwashers, they have 3-compartment sinks. So anything that they're going to be using in regards to washing is going to be done in 3-compartment sinks, and don't have any issues with mixing together with non-kosher. As opposed to Starbucks, they have dishwashers, and they have all their non-kosher being made in the same dishwasher with the kosher coffee or non-flavored coffee. That is something that the rabbis felt should be avoided, but there is a great website called crcweb.org that has about a 60-page article about Starbucks, and goes through the 200 different Starbucks that they visited in their research to maintain what is allowed. They don't allow regular coffee, but there are other rabbis that are lenient and do allow just a plain simple coffee at a Starbucks. Once you get going with the different detailed drinks and frappuccinos or whatever have you, it gets more complicated, and it's something which you should ask your local rabbi on. Many people ask the question, especially in the larger supermarkets, they're going shopping and they want to know if they could buy cut-up fruit at their local supermarket. Now, the way it works with the supermarkets is that every department that's in the supermarket have their own knives. So a deli has their own knives, the bakery, if they're using a knife for whatever reason, they have their separate knives. The fruit department, the produce department have their own knives. So the research was done that because all these larger supermarkets have their own knives, therefore you're allowed to buy cut-up fruits from all these larger supermarkets. However, if you're going to a mom-and-pop store, like a local corner deli, there's no way to permit that, because they may use the same knife to cut up their lunch, and because of that, the rabbis frowned upon buying cut-up fruit. Now, even if you're buying cut-up fruit from a large supermarket, you would not be able to buy the fruit that has issues of insects. For example, you can't buy strawberries that are cut up at a local supermarket, even if it's a larger supermarket, because of the fact that those strawberries are not washed properly, as well as raspberries and other items which have insects. Now, and according to the Jewish law, it's more stringent for you to eat a bug than to eat a cheeseburger, believe it or not. So that's why when the rabbis say about eating lettuce and all these things with bugs, it's very important to make sure to follow their protocol as far as washing it out properly. And getting back to our supermarket case, if they're cutting up strawberries, you have no way of knowing what kind of strawberry it is if they actually washed it properly. So therefore, most of the time they do have options of buying just melons and things, so you would be able to purchase those, but not purchase anything that has strawberries in the product. Now, obviously, if you're going to a supermarket that has a certification, that's going to go. In a Jewish supermarket, they're going to go as well on the produce many times, but even for a local Jewish supermarket, many times they'll have repackages of different vegetables and lettuce that they write on it, please check for bugs. So that's something to really be in concern about. Nowadays, the lettuce is an issue, especially because E. coli. So there are just opinions that say, obviously, from different locations, they're better, and from California might be good, but Arizona is not good. The Jewish brands may come from different states, so it's something to check into with your local kosher supermarket to find out if your items are affected on that. Many times people have questions, especially now getting the summer months, about going into Carvel. How many of you have ever gone to Carvel? I'm sure there's a few of them right in this neighborhood. Now, the question is, when you go into Carvel, those stores could be certified and the stores cannot be certified. It really depends on what the franchisee wants. In my neighborhood, for example, in Brooklyn, we have quite a few Carvels that are certified. You go traveling, many areas, they're not certified. It happens to be, I was telling Yaniv outside that at one point we certified 700 Carvel stores across the United States, because they felt that they wanted the rabbis to be there and to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, especially the workers. So therefore, we at one point certified that many stores. Now we're down to about 15 in different cities across New York, but basically Carvel stores that have the Chaf K, obviously you could be able to purchase everything in that store. The problem comes up if you go to a baseball game, basketball game, you go to somewhere where there's a Carvel stand. Now that Carvel store is not certified because it's not a store. It's just a stand saying they're serving Carvel. How do you know that that product in that stand is actually kosher certified? You don't. So the only way you'll be able to actually purchase something from there is if they see a closed container that has ice cream in it, perhaps a hard ice cream, and therefore you'll see a kosher symbol on it. If you go to certain venues of entertainment, you might see some Dippin' Dots at some amusement parks. You cannot buy ice cream from those venues unless you actually see the bag that's closed, that has a symbol on the bag, and now the bag is open for you, and now you're taking out the ice cream, because how do you know whatever's in that mix and that stand is actually going to be kosher certified? And if you have a cone, a regular simple ice cream cone can actually have pig fat in there and be animal fat, and therefore will not be certified. So you have to make sure that the ice cream is taken care of, but what about the cones? What about the sprinkles? I can't tell you how many times I've been in Brooklyn in the years in different parks, and there actually been people with nice beards buying products from the ice cream truck, and I'm talking about fresh ice cream from the ice cream truck. We have no way of knowing what's actually in that ice cream truck if we don't have a rabbis on the truck and verifying that this random Carvel truck or random ice cream truck is actually going to be certified. So you cannot buy ice cream from ice cream trucks if it's open and not packaged. Obviously, if it's packaged, you would be able to buy it. It happens to be I was in the 5 towns with my wife years ago, and there was a truck in one of the parks, and there was a long line of kids lined up, and people were coming with these ice cream cones. And I told them that you're probably serving your kids non-kosher, and they were not happy about it. Then I went over to the owner of the truck or the driver, and I asked them, how you guys saying that's kosher? There's a big sign with a Chaf K on it, and we're not certifying this truck. And they said, no, check a little closer. And the truth is, a little closer, they checked in the fine print, and it said only on packaged items. What they did was they probably asked the manufacturer of the ice cream, which is under the Chaf K, and said, oh, could you please send us your kosher certificate? They did that. They made a copy of it, and it said just on packaged products. So the kosher consumer has a job not to assume that everything is just kosher certified and take it for face value. Your job is to make sure that you're going into those stores and going into those ice cream trucks and whatever you find and think that it's kosher certified, just to double check and triple check and say maybe the kosher cert is expired. Kosher certificates expire, every year, because sometimes it could expire every few months, because we want the customer and the Chaf K client or any kosher agency, that's how it works, is that we want them to constant checks and balances to make sure that everything's in place. So we don't give certifications for 5 years at a shot. It's all done on a case-by-case basis to be able to make sure that they're following protocol. So if you see a certificate that's expired, that could mean either that the company actually doesn't want certification anymore, or they lost certification. And just don't assume that if it's expired, it means that the company is just backlogged with secretarial work and they plan on giving it out to them again in the future. It's something always to be concerned about when you're going shopping and seeing different supermarkets and grocery stores. Many people have a question about hard cheese. They go to different pizza shops and they see Parmesan cheese, and they want to know if they have to wait 6 hours before they eat meat. And that question comes up on a regular basis. You're getting a salad with Parmesan cheese, if it's sprinkled in, and do you have to wait 6 hours? Now, the rabbis speak about waiting 6 hours. Obviously, it's brought down in the Talmud, and it's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law. Now, technically speaking, you wouldn't have to really wait anything, because the rabbis say as long as you wash your mouth out and you have some food in between, then if you eat meat, you can have dairy after. However, the Rambam, the Maimonides maintain that you have to wait like 6 hours, because those days the meals are spread out that long, and it takes time for the meat to digest, so therefore you have to wait like 6 hours. However, the Ramah, Moshe Ishla, says not like 6 hours, but you have to wait 6 hours. So many people have the custom of waiting in the 5th hour before eating dairy, because that's based on the opinion of the Rambam that says Moishe is like 6 hours. But the overwhelming opinion of many of the Paiskim is to wait 6 hours, and the rabbis felt that you should not change that at any point. But if you have a community custom or a family practice to wait less, that is what you should follow. So the question is, how does it work with cheese? Now, the way they age cheese is that they put it into a cave and add certain enzymes into it to make sure it has a hard consistency to it. Most of the cheeses that come nowadays, you won't really find that's being hard cheese and aged cheese, but Parmesan cheese, in order for it to be called Parmesan cheese, it has to be aged. Now, you'll say aged 6 months and above, but Parmesan cheese is usually aged more than that. The rabbis felt if you're going to be aging the cheese, the strong taste in that cheese is very strong, and therefore you would have to wait the same period you do when you wait 6 hours after meat. You would have to wait that length of time after dairy, a hard cheese as well, before eating meat. So that's why if you go to a pizza shop and they're using Parmesan cheese, you'll have to wait 6 hours. But there is an opinion of the Yad Yehuda. And the Yad Yehuda holds that anytime you take that cheese and you melt it, then it loses the sharpness and you wouldn't have to wait 6 hours. Some rabbis felt that in that case, anyways, you should wait 6 hours. But if you want to be lenient, you do have an opinion to be lenient on that as long as the cheese is melted, you could be lenient and not have to wait the 6 hour period. It happens to be that most pizza shops do not use Parmesan cheese because of the expense that the Parmesan cheese costs, and the slice of pizza, instead of being $2 or $2.50, it would be $5. So some pizza stores do charge that price for the Parmesan cheese, and others, and most pizza stores use mozzarella cheese, which is not aged, and you would not have to wait 6 hours at all after eating that product. The rabbis also said in the Talmud and Pesachim that you should not mix fish and meat together. Now, some of the Sephardic rabbis hold that it's not fish and meat, it's fish and milk. That's why some Sephardic people will not have lox and cream cheese, because you're mixing fish and milk together. But for the most part, most authorities say it's fish and meat. How does that apply to a kosher consumer? Well, obviously now it's going to get warmer and warmer outside, and the barbecues are going to start heating up soon, and people are going to start with sauces on their meat and chicken. And some sauces have anchovies in it. Worcestershire sauce is a good example. They actually have anchovies. Anchovies is a fish. How are you allowed to use that on your meat products? And the answer is you're not allowed to mix fish and meat together. Therefore, that sauce that has anchovies in it would not be able to be used with your products. Now, how do the kosher agencies give certification? The answer to that is there's a dispute in the contemporary opinions whether something which is nullified by 60 times the volume of the product, is that considered an issue or not? Is that considered a danger? Because the rabbis say fish and meat together, cooking it is a danger, and we don't want to do dangerous things. So the rabbis felt if it's something which is nullified by 60 times the amount, then maybe there's no danger involved. So the rabbis say that if you're going to use this sauce that has anchovies in it, but it's such a minute amount, then there's no concern, and you will find that rabbis do give the certification on the fish product. Now, if you will find the product that says Chaf fish on that sauce, that means that there's actually anchovies in there, and it's not nullified in 60 times that amount, and because of that you should not be using that together with your fish and meat products. Besides the fact that there's barbecue sauce that could be an issue, sometimes there are orange juices that add also omega-3, which is a fish product, byproduct, and therefore you would not be able to eat that at a meat meal. Now, in regards to eating it before or after, obviously if you're not eating it together with it, it wouldn't be an issue. Now, once we're dealing with products that are necessarily to be avoided, there are many questions which come up as well in labels. If you go to a supermarket, you'll see it says on the container, may contain anchovies, or may contain sardines or fish or shellfish. And the question is, may contain, what does that mean? Women call me up all the time and they say, oh yeah, I have a chicken soup and I want to use onions, and it says may contain traces of dairy. How am I using this in the chicken soup? I say just put it right into the chicken soup. Why? Because the federal government maintains that any time there's parts per million of a product on there, of an allergen, it has to say it on the package. And because of that, the companies are very careful with allergens, and they're going to list it on the actual container because they don't want to get in trouble with the FDA. But according to halacha, that is completely parv. So if you see anytime it says may contain traces of dairy, that product is not dairy, and you'll see that because the kosher symbol will be parv. Even though you'll see traces of dairy, traces of shellfish, which is not kosher, but it's parts per million, and the kosher law mandates that there's no concern, and you will be able to purchase that. One other thing with the packaging before we go on to the last set of questions is D and DE. Now, I'm sure all you know that DE stands for dairy. Now, DE stands for dairy equipment. What is the difference between dairy and dairy equipment? To make things simpler, we'll visit a muffin facility. So take a random muffin facility, they're making muffins, cookies, basic pastries. What they do is they'll have dairy in the mix. Some companies will use powdered milk and some will use real milk. Most of the companies will use powdered milk because powdered milk lasts very long. It has a long shelf life, it won't go rancid. Regular milk, you have to keep in the refrigerator, and it's more costly. So they'll use the powdered milk and it'll be dairy, and then they'll put it in the muffin mix in the bowl, and then they'll put it into a hopper. And they'll put it in the little molds, and you'll have your muffins or your cookies. And then the company wants to get certification. So the rabbi goes down there and makes sure that all the ingredients are kosher. And now, because there's milk in the product or in the formula, you'll have a dairy symbol on the product. Okay, what happens if the company says, you know what, we have so many people that have dairy, but people are allergen and allergic to dairy, they don't want dairy. So we don't want any dairy in the product. We say, okay, take the dairy ingredient out of the product. So they take the dairy out. Now they want to use the same oven for this other product. Now whenever you're using an oven and there's heat involved, whatever you put in that oven, the oven takes on. So if it's a dairy product, the oven now becomes dairy. So if you want to take this product that has no dairy ingredients in the product, it's just using the same oven, that is what we call DE. That's dairy equipment. There's no dairy in the product. It's a dairy equipment issue. They're using the same equipment. In order to avoid a dairy equipment issue, the company can kosherize the oven. How do they do that? They call the rabbi and say, Rabbi, we don't want to have any DE, we want to have parv. Because we know the Jewish people, they like eating things with no restrictions, and they know that DE can't be eaten together with meat, so we want to have parv, neutral. So therefore, they call us up and we make sure that all the equipment is washed out well. There's 24 hours downtime. And once the oven is kosherized and all the equipment is kosherized, then we can have a parv symbol on the product, obviously making sure that there's no dairy ingredients in the product. But companies, in order to do that, have to be down 24 hours, sometimes a little longer, because we have to make sure the equipment is washed out well. And they don't want to be down, because if they're down, the machinery is off. If the machinery is off, they're not making any money. So because of that, they say, you know what, we like the parv, but it's going to cost us too much money to be down. Let's just do DE. So they stay with the DE symbol. Many times you'll have a kosher agency that has a D symbol on the item, but really it's DE. But they don't use the DE symbol. So it's the job of a consumer, for example, if you see a D symbol on a product, most of the times it's actually going to be dairy, because it'll say contains milk. But if you're questionable whether it's really dairy, there's one or two agencies that do not use a DE symbol, so you have to call them up and say, I know you don't use a DE symbol. Is this product really dairy? I don't see any milk ingredients in there. Could it be actually DE? The Chaf K actually uses a DE symbol, so if something does say dairy, it's really dairy, and if it's DE, then it's DE. So getting back to the DE, for example, we have another question that comes up, because now if you're waiting 6 hours from meat to dairy, could you have a DE product within the 6-hour waiting period? Now, because we just spoke that there's no dairy in the DE product, you will be able to have the DE within 6 hours. And that comes up very, very frequently, because we certify a lot of ices, companies and manufacturers that do ices, and those ices are not dairy, they're dairy equipment. So if you wanted to have your ices at the end of the meat meal, not together with meat, but at the end, not that you will have ices together with meat either, but you never know, especially your kids. So you would have to eat it after their meat meal and not together with the meat. Another question which comes up with DE is that many people are concerned, and they only eat milk from a cow. That's what we call Chalav Yisrael. Chalav Yisrael means the rabbi is actually on the farm, visiting and viewing the farm on a regular basis, and he lives there perhaps all the time, and he's making sure that the milk coming from the cow is coming from the cow, and no other milk is mixed in to that milk. And because of that, you have Chalav Yisrael. But the many tens of thousands of people eat Chalav Stam. Chalav Stam means that it's just regular milk, what they call Chalav companies. Rabbi Moishe Feinstein, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, he wrote a responsa indicating that because the federal government goes to those facilities and those farms, making sure that only the cow milk is used, there's no need to have a Jewish person seeing the actual milking process, as long as you know that there's a Jewish person involved in the milking, because you have a rabbi visiting there, and you have the government that makes sure that there's no milk other than cow milk in the facility. Therefore, he maintained you can rely on the fact that you can drink milk and not have any issue of Chalav Stam. And it will be perfectly permitted to drink that. And that's why many companies and many people, you see symbols that say dairy on it, and they're eating dairy, and that's not Chalav Yisrael. Many times you'll see a product, people will call us up and say, oh, it's Chaf K dairy, is it Chalav Yisrael? It's only Chalav Yisrael if you see the Chalav Yisrael indication on the package. And because Chalav Yisrael costs so much more money to produce and costs so much money to get it shipped and have a rabbi there, so therefore most of the products that are generically dairy do not have the Chalav Yisrael insignia on there. Now getting back to DE, if you're concerned and only have products which are higher status of Chalav Yisrael, you don't have to worry about DE, because again, there's no issue of milk in there. There's no milk in the product. It's a dairy equipment concern. So if you want to be stringent and have Chalav Yisrael in your home, whatever it is, that's fine. But again, you could be lenient and have a product that only has an equipment issue on it. The last thing I wanted to discuss before we leave room for questions is toothpaste and mouthwash. Now, it's not necessarily generally related to a food product, but it is something which is manufactured and we do put it in our mouth. Now, some rabbis felt that toothpaste should have a certification. Why? Because the way they make toothpaste is the following. It used to be that they took chalk that they write on the board. You know, you remember in the days when you were in school, you had chalk and they wrote on the board, and they crushed that chalk up and they added glycerin, which could be kosher, could be not kosher. And they also add different flavors. Now, because of the fact that the glycerin was in the product, but it wasn't there 50% of the product, the rabbis felt, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal, maintained that you could be lenient because it's not a food item. And if it's not a food item, even though the glycerin in there could be from animals, but it's not meant to be eaten, and then the glycerin there is below 50%. Nowadays, maybe about 8 to 9 years ago, they changed. Instead of manufacturing the toothpaste with chalk, they use sand, hydrated silica, which is basically just sand, and they put it into it as an abrasive to make sure that you're cleaning your teeth properly. And now the glycerin is above 50%. So now they felt that if it's above 50%, so it's most of the product is glycerin and non-kosher, so they felt that because you're taking it into your mouth, you should have a kosher symbol on it, even if you're going to spit it out. I personally, for the last, I would say 20 years, maybe 15 years, use a product called Tom's of Maine. I'm not a salesman for Tom's of Maine. I don't get any commission, but I can just tell you it does have a reputable certification on there, and it's basically the same stuff. The difference between the different toothpastes are not really that large, and if it does have a symbol on there, and they have many different flavors, I felt that if I'm taking something in my mouth, I wanted it to have a symbol. But there are rabbis that felt that because it's not a food, and you never eat toothpaste, it's not meant to be eaten, then you do not need a certification on toothpaste. Again, it's up to your personal preference if you want to go that route. In regards to mouthwash, it's a little different because mouthwash is basically something which you do spit out. It's not meant to be swallowed at all. But mouthwash, again, could be glycerin in there that makes it taste good. Could come from animals, could come from vegetable. Depends on what's cheaper. And because of the fact that the tasting in the mouthwash tastes good, it could be from non-kosher. Again, some rabbis felt that even if it's meant to be spit out, you are putting it in your mouth. Again, there are Tom's of Maine products out there that do have mouthwash, and I did the taste between certain mouthwashes, and you really can't tell the difference at all. It basically does the same trick. But if you want to be lenient, again, you have those opinions that are lenient in regards to mouthwash. In regards to Listerine pocket packs, many people have the question on a regular basis. All those ingredients are food ingredients. They're meant to be swallowed. So much so that you see people on a fast day eating them, or during davening for some reason they're eating Listerine pocket packs. Obviously, it's a food item. It's meant to be swallowed. So that should have an hashgacha on there. And in fact, the Listerine pocket packs do have an hashgacha, and you should only purchase those with a symbol. When you're dealing with sprays, like Listerine sprays, those are not certified and should not be concerned. When you're dealing with dental floss, even if it's mint flavored, the mint is very minimal. Even if we don't know where the mint's coming from, you will be able to purchase dental floss that does have mint flavor on it, and there's no concern of that. When you're dealing with lip balm, so it's interesting, they did a study a few years ago that a woman, I think, can ingest 2 pounds of lipstick and lip balm in their lifetime. So even though you put it on your lips, you're actually eating that, you put it in your bread, and now it goes into your system. So you're consuming that. And some rabbis felt that why should you have cherry flavored lip balm when that cherry flavor can have other ingredients in there that are not kosher, and now you're putting it into your system. So some rabbis felt that you can use other lip balm products like Pro Vaseline or lip balm that doesn't have any other flavors in it. If you're putting that in your mouth, we want to make sure that whatever you're taking in your mouth is certified, and that's what those rabbis felt. But obviously, if you see people who are not concerned with that, they hold that the lip balm is not a food item, even though you're putting it in your mouth and it goes in your body. They obviously are lenient. The last question which I wanted to deal with is that we spoke before about the 1,400 kosher certifying agencies. Why are some certifying agencies sort of recommended and others are not? You do see many rabbis on products and many symbols out there, and sometimes we have a question that, why is this symbol different than other symbols? And the truth is, I was in the facility about 3-4 years ago. As I mentioned before, part of my job is to solicit other companies to get certified. And I asked them, and they contacted me, they said, we want to get certified. I met them at a show or something, and I asked them, when was the last time a rabbi was here? You say you're kosher certified by your agency and you want to get a reputable certification. She said, I'm in this facility for 10 years. I've never seen the rabbi once. So even though they have a certification on the product and they have whatever symbol they have on there, and it may resemble some sort of K on there, and you're not sure what the K symbol is on there, it's very, very important to make sure that the symbols that you're buying are reputable certifications, because we have in our facility, we have many people who had certifications and many people that didn't have certifications, and they want the different symbols, and they say, what's the difference between that symbol and the other symbol? And the difference is that we actually are in the factories on a regular basis. We have rabbis sometimes in factories that are there every day, depending on the level of certification needed in a specific factory. All the reputable certifications out there actually answer up to rabbinical boards if questions come up. There's checks and balances. We have office staff. It's a serious operation when you're dealing with trying to put kosher food in your mouth, not because it has Jewish letters or anything on it and coming from different countries. Does that necessarily mean that the level of certification is going to be the level that you actually want. So it's very important that just because you see a symbol on there doesn't mean that that symbol is something which is reputable and something which is actually rabbis visiting for the facility, and that's something to be concerned about when you're going shopping and seeing different symbols on there. If you're not sure of a specific symbol, obviously you can ask your local Orthodox rabbi when you have these kind of questions. So I do appreciate everyone coming out this evening. I did want to leave the next few minutes for any questions you may have on kosher or any other kosher law. But before I end, I do know that there is a number of BJ's wholesale clubs in the area. Is that correct? Yes, there's College Point, there's Middle Village, and we certify the BJ's Wholesale Club. We're up to 49 clubs now in 8 states. Thank God we had a lot of help from above to be able to make sure that that's happening, and I was the one that sort of got that going. And I do have many people that ask me questions on the BJ's Wholesale Club in the beginning, and now they're usually accustomed to it. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that we do certify the BJ's Wholesale Clubs. Make sure to look out for the kosher symbol, because again, only 49 out of the 215 clubs are certified. So you may be traveling and assume that one club is certified, and maybe all of them are, but that's not the case. In addition, about 6-7 months ago, I authored my latest book on honesty. I realized that there's some people who may have different levels of honesty in the world. So I, before the high holiday days, I published the book, because that's when we know that everyone's money is set from the beginning of the year of how much you'll make. So the book is for sale outside for $20. It discusses many of the questions that come up on a regular basis in honesty. We are publishing the next volume 7 of my series, Halachically Speaking, which will have over 300 pages on summer halachas, which deals with many of the bungalows and the Catskill questions, but I'm sure you'll see that in the media. Okay, thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening. Now it's time for questions. Yes.
You were talking before about glycerin.
Yeah.
What's the whole issue with vitamins and mineral supplements?
Well, that's an excellent question. Vitamin and mineral supplements, there is a discussion amongst the authorities whether it's considered a food supplement or you're eating as a medicine. If it's a medicine and you're taking it as a capsule, there are some that felt that if it's gelatin based, then there's so many other varieties. Like I went last night to the store and I wanted to get an Advil for my daughter. Exactly, but because there are some rabbis that felt that the gel caps on there are not really edible, and there are some that felt that you just take the gel cap and put it in a thin tissue and then consume it, and others felt, why do you need the gel cap? There's so many other Advil products that don't have the gel caps. Even though there are rabbis years ago that permitted gelatin, the custom is that in the kosher agencies now, they won't permit gelatin from non-kosher sources, and you're dealing with medicines, you do have alternatives. Now when you deal with vitamins and food supplements, because of the fact that it is a food supplement and it's in the place of food, there are so many different vitamins out there that do have kosher certifications on there, literally in the thousands, so it's preferable to buy those with the kosher certification on there. Yeah?
100% rolled oats, similar to Quakers, does it require that?
No, 100% does not require any certification. There are many products out there that do not require any certification at all, and it's a job of a consumer to probably research that instead of paying a premium dollar for something that doesn't require certification. But because of the nature of the process that's so simple, those things do not require any certification.
You spoke about dairy equipment, you mentioned ovens. It sounded like you meant that an oven, once it's used for dairy, has to be kosher to use for non-dairy, which is ridiculous because everyone has an oven at home where they bake chicken and they make dairy products.
Right. So when you're dealing with a factory setting, we can't have them going back and forth on a regular basis and certify tens of thousands of products that they're making. If it's dairy, then it's dairy. But most of the time, we tell people if they want to use the same oven, even if you're going traveling in a hotel, to double wrap it. And if you double wrap products, then it doesn't have any issue because nothing is getting out, nothing is going into the product. But if you're going to have it open and then there's residue on the oven and it's just the same oven, then rabbis do frown upon using the same oven if you're not going to take any steps to make sure that it's covered. Yes?
When you see a kosher symbol, and it's parv, why don't they put parv on it?
So most of the times they will put parv on it. The times when they don't, they might say a certification with a P on it. Maybe it indicates that it's Passover. In addition, many of the companies, when they pay for the plates, the kosher certifying plates, there's more money involved if you're dealing with a regular symbol, and every letter costs money. So the companies will say, you know what, if we're just going to put the regular symbol on it and that'll be enough for people to buy it, and they'll know that it's non-dairy because they also will say dairy, then that's why they opt out of that indication on it. Yeah?
I had a question about the eggs. I bought brown eggs in the supermarket, and sometimes there are dots outside in the shell and sometimes inside.
Right. So eggs.
What is it?
So eggs, those are brown spots, which the rabbis felt that are not considered the same as blood spots. The rabbis speak about it, and they said because eggs now are so cheap, if you do see a blood spot in the egg, you should throw it out and not use it. But that was only a concern years ago when they used to, fertilize the eggs. And nowadays it's not the case. The egg is not that you see in the market is not going to end up being a chick. So that's why they felt that those blood spots in the eggs, it's preferable in any case just to throw those out.
It doesn't look like blood.
Right, so those are brown spots, those are fine. But as far as regular blood spots in eggs, that's what the rabbis felt when you do buy the eggs in supermarkets.
Yes, 2 questions. One is about having a non-Jew cook. Like if you have somebody, like a housekeeper who you want to cook, say, chicken on Friday afternoon when, when Shabbos starts early, would it be okay for me to put the oven on and say in the morning when she comes, oh, I'm cooking a potato in the oven. Later on, can you just increase the temperature to 350?
So that's a good question. It happens to be, I wrote extensively on Bishul Akum. We didn't have time to discuss every detail of it, but basically Bishul Akum, as long as the Jewish person is involved in the cooking somewhat. So if the non-Jewish person, for example, puts the product on the fire, right? And then the Jewish person is actually stirring it somewhat, as long as he has some sort of handle in the cooking process. So if you wanted to put the oven on for them, for example.
Putting the oven on, and what if I put the oven on to cook potatoes? And then and just casual, I don't want to explain the whole thing to you, just say, oh, leave the oven on and then you can make chicken.
Yes, that's considered the Jewish person had a hand in it. It's not like the cooking was done by the non-Jew, from beginning to end. The Jewish person put the oven on, the product was cooking more than a third of the product already, and therefore that's fine. You can do that.
And the other question is on the capsules. No, I agree, like with Advil and those type of products, just buy the one that isn't a capsule. There's a lot of other options. But what if you want to take a supplement that has a gelatin capsule? Yes, there are kosher certified ones, but what if the one you want that has all the ingredients you want, the medical ingredients and so on, is the one that is a capsule? Can you?
I mean, there are rabbis that would permit that kind of capsule, but again, you are in a situation where you're taking it as a food supplement. So what I've done in the past, when that was maybe a few years ago when I had to have that, was I just took a thin tissue and wrapped it in it and swallowed it as that. Therefore, at least
swallowing the paper?
It's not a food item.
Yeah, you're swallowing the thin tissue with the actual pill. This way, even though you're not eating it, you're not eating the product, but still you had an added measure of not eating something which is from animals. Yes.
Okay, just to clarify, so you're allowed to have non-flavored coffee at a Dunkin Donuts or at a Starbucks
So Dunkin Donuts would be permitted. Starbucks, there are some rabbis that are on the fence with it because of the fact that they do use the coffee products in the same dishwasher as the ham and the sandwiches. But depends on who you ask. There are some that are lenient with regular coffee, even at a Starbucks. Once you get more complicated with the kinds of drinks and the different mixes and the whipped creams and things like that, then things get a little more complicated.
just hot water or tea?
Yeah, that would have the same thing as the coffee. Yes.
Kosher calls with gluten-free sign. Kosher for Pesach.
So even though something is gluten-free, doesn't mean it's kosher for Passover because the gluten in the product is taken out, but there could be other components in there that might not meet the Passover requirements. So even though if you have a manufacturer that's completely gluten-free, that would not make it kosher for Passover. Yes?
Like, obviously your other things, they have this printout usually of what's kosher normally is also kosher for Passover without needing any other
Correct.
certification. Does a Chav K have some things?
We don't necessarily have that kind of list, but again, if the manufacturers, depending on what they produce, sometimes the way they produce it is just kosher for all year round, Passover, non-Passover, so that's why they do come over with the list. But we generally just tell people to look for the kosher for Passover symbol on products, but the other agencies that do come up with those lists, they go the extra mile with trying to, make sure that whatever they're producing throughout the year does have the kosher for Passover status throughout the year. Yes.
When you were talking about the milk and the cholesterol and the regular milk, they're saying that the rabbis were saying that you don't really have to have the hechsher for the regular milk.
So there's different levels of milk. There's sometimes you'll find people that don't eat regular dairy because they want the Halav Yisrael level of dairy, which means the rabbi is on the farm making sure that cow milk is going into the container and nothing else. But then there's obviously probably the masses of people that do not have that extra requirement, and they'll have just regular dairy. Now, if you're having regular dairy, that's assuming that there's a kosher symbol, obviously, on the cookie, on the muffin, because you have to have a kosher symbol on those items. Now, if you're going to a area where you want to go to get a milk at a local Target or wherever it is, and it doesn't have a symbol on the milk, even though there are vitamins in there, the rabbis do feel that you can just buy milk, because milk is one of those things which are generically kosher certified if you're not having that higher level of kosher milk.
That doesn't apply to ice cream also?
No, ice cream can have enzymes and emulsifiers and things in there that could not, it's not just milk, it's other ingredients in the ice cream, so just regular ice cream would have to be kosher certified, yes.
Can you explain very quickly what Yashan and Chadash is?
It would take a little longer to explain that, maybe after the lecture is done. There are many people who do eat yashan throughout the year, and that it's something which has to do with the grain and when it's planted and when it takes root and when they take it out. I did write extensively on that as well, and I could refer you to that article. Yes?
When a hashgacha gives their hashgacha on a given place, like let's say a restaurant, so if there's different ways that, like, whether or not they allow the hashgiach to work in the store,
Correct.
cashier or not. So what's like the rough case?
So generally, when you're dealing with hashgacha in restaurants, is the way it works is that the rabbi and the mashgiach that works there is called a working mashgiach. Because of the fact that the mashgiachim have to wash the vegetables and be very active throughout the day, there's not much to do there unless they're working mashgiachim. So a lot of times, what we call working mashgiachim is they're washing the vegetables, doing everything for kashrus, but also dealing with whatever managerial things that the owner or the manager requests of them. And this way, it affords them the price to pay for a mashgiach to be able to do his kosher work as well. So I wanted to thank everybody for listening. And again, the Sefer on Honesty is outside for purchase for $20. And everyone have a wonderful evening.